Okay, so we start with question 7. We're looking at the heart here. Okay, so if you're looking at the heart there, what you're going to see is the heart has two distinct sides to the heart, the left side and the right side. You'll also see that there's a blue area of the heart and there's typically a red area in the diagram of the heart. Okay, so the blue area of the heart is what the area that contains what we call deoxygenated blood. That's blood that has no oxygen in it. Okay, so what we need to do with that blood is we need to pump that blood to the lungs so that it gets oxygen, right? And then the blood comes back from the lungs through the left side of the heart, which is the red side of the heart. And now that blood has oxygen, and that's where we pump that to the other side of the body, okay? So the heart literally does two specific jobs. The right side of the heart pumps blood to the lungs. The left side of the heart pumps blood to the rest of the body. Now, the way that you look at it, because it's upside down, is you're looking at it reverse. So that's why the right side is left on the diagram and the left side is right. Okay, right? So the first thing that we're going to talk about are the concept of these valves. Okay, so does anyone know what a valve does just in general, like a valve in a car or a valve in a heart or whatever?
Open and close.
Yep, and it just allows movement of fluid in one direction. Okay, that's really important in the heart for obvious reasons, right? Like we don't want blood flowing in the wrong direction in the heart. So a valve will open, fluid will go through, and then the valve will close shut. Okay, so let's have a look at a few different valves that we have in our heart. The first one is called the pulmonary valve. Okay, and what that does, it separates the right ventricle. Sorry, the right ventricle from the pulmonary artery. So what that basically does, it allows blood to go from the right ventricle, which is the bottom part of the right side of the heart, to the lungs. Okay, so remember, the blood gets sent from the right side of the heart to the lungs to give it oxygen. Again, this is not something, again, this is for the course. It's not something you'll probably never have to remember the role of the 4 valves, just to know that we have valves in the heart, and obviously, you know, they can wear out as well. You can get artificial valves. I worked in cardiology for a couple of years, and they would do valve replacements on humans, and they would use pigs' valves because pigs have the exact same size heart, same size chamber, and same size valves as humans, would you believe? So you can get pig valves inserted into your heart, or you can get a mechanical valve, like a plastic valve, and it makes a clicking sound every time the valve opens and closes. So we'd have patients that would come in, and literally you would hear a tiny click every time their heart would beat, which would probably drive you mad at first until you got used to it, I guess. So yeah, that's the role of the valve. So the second one, guys, tricuspid valve. So that allows blood flow from the right atrium to the right ventricle. The atrium is the top chamber of the heart. The ventricle is the bottom chamber of the heart. Okay. That's the tricuspid valve. Tri just means it's got 3, like it's got 3 leaves, like a BMW sign, like it's got 3 leaflets. Number 3 is the aortic valve. That's a really important valve, guys, because that allows blood flows from the left ventricle through the aorta. The aorta is the giant artery that leaves our heart, right? The most important artery in our body, because all the blood leaves our heart through that big artery and it travels to the rest of our body. Okay, so that aortic valve needs to be very, very, very strong. Any damage to the aortic valve, and it can be pretty severe pretty quickly. Okay, and then the other one is the bicuspid valve. As you can see, it is the left side of the heart, left atrium to the left ventricle. Okay, so the blood comes into the top chambers of the heart, the valves open, the blood goes to the bottom chambers of the heart, the valves close again. Okay, so they're the role of the 4 valves in our heart. All right. We good with that one, guys?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, great. Yep, those 4 valves. Okay, second question. We're talking about coronary circulation. Okay, so, whoops. Explain coronary circulation and improving blood pressure can have a positive effect on heart health. Okay, so this is important. So the heart pumps blood to the whole body. We understand that. But we also need to understand is that the heart itself is a muscle, right? It needs blood too. So we have arteries on top of our heart, and that the heart pumps blood to those too. Okay, so that's coronary circulation. That's circulation of blood in the blood vessels that supply the heart muscle. So that's the classic heart attack concept, yeah? What happens is one of those blood vessels on top of the heart gets blocked, gets clotted up with plaque through bad diet, smoking, cholesterol, whatever, okay? If a blood vessel gets blocked, gets clotted, then all the tissue downstream of that blood, that clot gets no oxygen. So that part tissue starts to die. That's what a heart attack is, okay? So a heart attack is a complete blockage of an artery, which means that part of the heart tissue tends to die. Now, I worked in cardiology for quite a few years. We'd see heart attack patients come in. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty wild. Literally, from the moment you have a heart attack, you probably have 40, 45 minutes to get that artery opened up. Otherwise, you're in permanent trouble. As in, you're going to have complete heart failure or you're probably going to die. So that was the gold standard. From the moment you have the heart attack to the moment they get you in the operating table, they put that balloon in, the stent, and they blow up and open up that artery. It's like 45 to 60 minutes max, because the longer you go, that heart tissue gets less oxygen, it dies, it dies, it dies, it dies. Okay, so improving blood pressure. All right, so blood pressure essentially is how hard your heart has to pump every beat to push blood around the body. Okay, so if you have high blood pressure, the arteries are under so much pressure that the heart has to pump really hard to move the same amount of blood around the body. And the heart is like any other muscle. It gets tired, it wears out. Okay, so you don't want stiff, hard arteries. You want nice, easy, soft, relaxed arteries that open and closed. Okay, so if you exercise a lot, what that does, it reduces the stiffness of the arteries. So the arteries now can move better because the arteries get lots of blood flow, lots of circulation. Yeah, so improving blood pressure reduces pressure on your heart and reduces the risk of heart disease. Okay, that's pretty basic knowledge, but literally we're reducing the stiffness in the arteries. Think about a pack-a-day smoker that eats like shit, has high cholesterol and doesn't exercise. Their arteries are real stiff like PVC pipes, right? Which means the plaque just gets built up in them and it gets narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower, and that's where the blockage comes. Okay? So that's why improving blood pressure reduces the stress on your heart, all right? Improved blood pressure also allows for an increased rate or speed of blood flow. Okay, so that now, because we've got less pressure in our arteries, we can get blood moving faster throughout our body. And that's great because we get more oxygen now to our working muscles. Okay, so when we're exercising, we're riding a bike or going up a hill, our quads need oxygen, right? We're able to get more blood flow, more oxygen to those quads. Okay. And because the blood's circulating more, we've got less clots and less risk of stroke. Okay, so, these are kind of obvious things, but it's important to understand some of the physiology. We reduce the stiffness on the arteries, we reduce the risk of clots, reduce the risk of heart disease. Okay, sweet. Yep, all right, that one. Okay, next one, bit of a tricky one here. This is how muscles contract, okay? And this is called the sliding filament theory. So if you think about a muscle fiber, so let's think about your bicep, okay? What you might not realize is your bicep is made up of millions and millions of muscle fibers, okay? And all these muscle fibers are connected to each other, right? All the way down the length of your bicep and all the way across the cross-section of your bicep, okay? And they look like this. So there's two distinct parts to your muscle fibers. One is called actin, A-C-T-I-N. They're the thin parts of your muscle fibers. And one's called myosin, which is the thick part of your muscle fibers. Now, when the muscle contracts, what happens is those fibers connect, they bind on each other, and then they pull each other together, right? And that's how your muscles contract. So the filaments, the actin and myosin filaments, they connect to each other, they pull on each other, and that causes the muscle fibers to contract and shorten. Okay? So, contractile structures of muscle fibers called actin and myosin, they're thin and thick filaments. Together, they're called a sarcomere, all right? So you have sarcomeres that run all the way up and down, millions, hundreds and thousands of those run all the way up and down the length of your muscle fiber. Okay, so they contract. Okay, they pull on each other, they release energy, and they slide, and that causes a shortening in the muscle. So you can have a look and write that down from there. Okay, we don't need to get too much into the in-depth physiology here, but obviously we use energy for that to happen. So there's an energy currency we talked a bit about in Cert 3 called ATP, okay? And when we use ATP within those two actin and myosin filaments, that causes them to bind together and to slide on each other, okay? So it's the sliding filament theory of muscle contraction. Actin and myosin, you just grab on each other and pull, okay? Just give me a yell when you guys are done with that one.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, sweet. Actin and myosin. Yeah, guys, for, workshop 4, the anatomy and physiology stuff, this is probably one of the only workshops where it's really like there's quite a lot of knowledge just to kind of get in and write down. I try and explain it in a way that makes sense as much as possible, but it's one of those things where we just kind of have to understand these concepts, Okay, so we're talking about short and long-term adaptations you'll see in exercise. Okay, so the first question we're looking about, what actually happens during a single bout of exercise? So during one exercise session, what actually happens? And then the second one is, what are long-term effects? So what are positive long-term effects, which we've kind of talked a little bit about already. So the first one, okay, is there will be some form usually of delayed onset of muscle soreness, or DOMS. Yep. Okay. So what that essentially is micro tears in those muscles. Yep. And that leads to that delayed onset muscle soreness. Now, as I'm sure you guys are quite aware with DOMS, it's usually worse kind of 24, 48 hours after exercise. Okay. Logan, what would be some types of exercises or some things that would lead to DOMS?
Like high intensity interval training stuff.
Yeah. That definitely could be one. Do you have any other examples?
Do you mean just like what exercises?
Yeah, exercises or like concepts, like what might be some other things that could lead to DOMS?
Like Olympic lifts, like
Yeah.
clean and jerks and heavy lifting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anything heavy obviously is going to
Yeah.
cause more trauma and damage to the muscles. Anything typically lifted it's usually a slower speed, okay, with a focus on the eccentric phase, okay. So when a muscle is lengthening under load, that's when you typically cause more damage, more micro tears to that muscle, and that's where it has to grow back bigger and stronger, okay? So one of the reasons why bodybuilders do a lot of like slow lifting, time under tension stuff is the more time that muscle is under tension, the more growth you're going to get in that muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so usually like really slow eccentric stuff, right? So a typical bodybuilding protocol might be like a 4-second lower and then a 1-second contraction. 1, 2, 3, 4, contract. Yeah. So it's usually the longer eccentrics. And another one is usually it's unfamiliar exercises. You guys know that, yeah? There's an exercise you haven't done for a while, you'll be sore for a couple of days afterwards. If you haven't done walking lunges for 8 months or 12 months, do a set of 30 of those with weight and you won't be able to sit on the toilet for 5 days. Right?
Yeah.
Right? Even like I had a net session bowling the other day playing cricket, and I've like sore in all these random spots because I haven't bowled in like 6 months. Yeah. So like that's the same concept, right? So it's just unfamiliar activities or eccentric movements. Okay. Now what happens there? That's a signal. Okay. Those tears in the muscle signals amino acids in the form of protein that we eat to get delivered to that muscle to repair and recover it. Okay. So the micro tears in the muscle signals the repair and the recovery. And that's how the muscle gets bigger and gets stronger. Okay. So that happens during a session or directly after a session. The second one is obviously during a session, your heart rate's going to go up and your blood pressure is also going to go up during the session. That makes sense because there's increased demand of blood circulation supply to working muscles. If I put you on an assault bike and I get you to go all out for 30 seconds, your quads and your shoulders and your back screaming for energy. So our heart rate's going to come up, our blood pressure is going to go through the roof. That's okay short term because long term, our blood pressure will go down and our resting heart rate will go down. As you can see in the next question, which is the long-term effects. Okay, so short-term heart rate, blood pressure goes up. Long-term heart rate, blood pressure comes down. Okay, so the improved efficiency of our cardiorespiratory system leads to decreased heart rate and blood pressure, both at rest and at intensity. That's the training effect, right? If I get you to row a kilometer in, 3.5 minutes or 3 minutes 15 or something, and you're untrained, your heart rate might be 200 at the end. But if you're trained, your heart rate might be only 160 or 170. That's the improvement in the efficiency. Okay, and then the second one is, depending on your style of training, is you're going to improve the efficiency of either your fast twitch fibers or your slow twitch fibers. Okay, so if you're a marathon runner and all you do is marathon running, or all you do is long distance runs, muscular endurance, high rep stuff in the gym, your slow twitch muscles will get really strong. Yeah, you'll improve what's called the mitochondria number. So in the muscle cells, you've got these things called mitochondria. They're the powerhouses. That's how we break down energy. Yeah. So if you're a marathon runner and you run a lot of marathons, the slow twitch muscle fibers will get better. But if you don't train the fast twitch muscle fibers, they won't get better, right? Conversely, if you're a 100-meter sprinter and all you do is train fast twitch, those fast twitch muscle fibers will get stronger and more energetic and more able to use energy. Makes sense, right? That's like training specificity 101, So depending on what type of training you do, you get an improvement in the efficiency of either your fast or your slow twitch muscle fibers. Okay. If you think about like an element of training like CrossFit, they try and target a little bit of all of it. Yeah, a little bit of both. A little bit of fast twitch with some of the shorter, harder stuff, the powerlifting, the strength training, the Olympic lifting, and then the slow twitch muscle fibers with the longer effort stuff. Okay. We're good with that one, guys?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Alrighty, so that's short-term effects, and they're 2 long-term effects there. Okay, now the next one is, how would you monitor intensity? Okay, in a client. Okay, so there's 3 basic ways that you can do it. Okay, the first one is the talk test. We should all kind of understand the talk test. Andrew, do you understand? Could you explain kind of what the talk test is when you're with a client?
Basically, you just talk to them, and if they can't maintain their focus on the conversation, you can sort of gauge how hard it is for the client.
100%, mate. Exactly right. Yeah. So you're measuring the client's ability to maintain a conversation. If they can maintain a conversation, that would indicate they're in a comfortable aerobic steady state. Okay. If that's your goal with the client, that's great. Obviously, if you want to push them harder and they can still maintain a conversation with you, well, then they're not going hard enough, right? So the talk test just gives you a really good idea of where are they at. If they're only saying 1 or 2 words like that, then they might be training too hard if you're trying to get them to just do steady state training. Okay. The second one, as we all know, guys, is RPE. I'm sure you guys have used RPE a million times before. RPE scale is 1 to 10. The old school scale that we used to use was from 6 to 20, would you believe, which I know is pretty random, but usually the concept of 6 to 20 is like 6 would mean 60 beats per minute, 9 would mean 90 beats per minute, 13 would mean 130 beats per minute, etc. But if you ask your client, where are you on a 6 to 20 scale, they're going to look at you weird, hey? They'll be like, why 6 to 20? So we simplify it now, we use 1 to 10, right? That's a subjective measurement of training intensity. That's me. It's not objective. That's not my heart rate. That's not my work output. That's subjective. That's me saying, okay, this feels like it's a 7. This is getting harder. That was about a 9, etc. Okay. So how we can use that, we can peg that to loads and work output, and we can track that over time. Yeah. So we can put your client through a workout in week 1, and they go, that was 9 out of 10 hard. Then we can put your same client through a workout in week 6, and they go, oh, that was only a 7 out of 10, right? And that's another way that you can show progress. You can go, you used to rate this as a 9, now you rate this as a 7. Yeah, so you can use the RPE to track progress is what I'm saying. Okay. then the third one is heart rate zones. Okay, so if you are tracking clients' heart rates through chest straps, through Apple Watches, through however, right, you've got 5 specific training zones. And I mean, you can go into a lot more detail about this, but you can see what they are. That all kind of makes sense. They're all based on a percentage of a client's maximum heart rate. Yeah. And they're probably also similar in an RPE. So zone 1 is really light. That's a warm up. Yeah. 50 to 60% of your max. Okay. So that's really simple, really light, basic stuff. Zone 2 is light exercise. That's steady state. That's going for a walk. That's going for a really easy, steady jog where there's no lactic acid. You're like, I can maintain this pace forever. Yeah. That's about 60 to 70% of your max heart rate, right? Zone 3 is moderate. This is when early onset, BL means blood lactate, the lactic acid. Yeah. So you're starting to get the onset of lactic acid. It's starting to get difficult. You're like kind of going, oh, if I push harder or faster than this, I'll start to slow down. Do we know that feeling, guys? Like that threshold. I call it the threshold feeling. Yeah. It's kind of like sitting underneath the red line, right? So right underneath the point where I go, oh, if I go higher than this, I'm going to start to slow down. Okay. Zone 4 is heavy. That's anaerobic work. That's high intensity interval training. That's pushing hard for a minute, backing off. Pushing hard for 40 seconds, backing off. Yeah, zone 4, 80 to 90% of max heart rate. Lactic acid comes up, we bring it back down. Lactic acid comes up, bring it back down. Yeah. So usually you can't stay in zone 4 for very long. You'll start to fatigue. Yeah. And then obviously zone 5 is your maximal. Sprints, complete lactic acid overload, get on an assault bike until your arms fall off, 30-second max output, that sort of stuff, where you're really going at your complete maximal effort. Going so hard where you know what it's like, where like the walls start to close in, you know, and you get tunnel vision, that sort of stuff, right? So every heart rate zone has its place in training. Obviously, zone 4 and zone 5 you can't do for very long, but zone 4 and zone 5 are really effective for improving your body's ability to tolerate that lactic acid, which is vital. But you do short bursts at 4 and 5, you know. You might alternate between zone 5 for a minute, zone 2 for a minute, zone 5 for a minute, zone 2 for a minute, that sort of stuff. Okay. Yeah, it's all sort of pretty intuitive stuff, I hope by now, yeah? Okay, sweet. All right, last one, happy days. Okay, so what we got here, guys, are 3 different types of joints, yeah, and we're going to explain them. So the first one is a fibrous joint. So joints are where bones connect, first of all, okay? So connection of 2 bones is a joint, yeah? We have 3 different types of joints. The first one is a fibrous joint. That is where the joint is fused. It doesn't move, okay? So the joint is connected by thick collagen tissue, and it is an immovable joint. It doesn't move. So think about your skull, right? So your skull is a selection of plates, yeah? But they're fused together. Your sternum is fused to your rib cage. So typically, joints that provide protection are fused, right? So your skull protects your brain, your sternum protects your heart and your lungs. They are fused joints. We don't want them to move, okay? Because their role is protection. We need them to be strong, okay? The second one is called the cartilaginous joint, okay? And this is the joints that they're connected by cartilage. These are slightly movable, okay? So we want a little bit of movement in these, but not much. Think about your ribs, yeah? All right, we want a bit of movement in your ribs to allow you to breathe in and breathe out. But we don't want your ribs moving all over the place because, again, they protect your internal organs, right? So they're connected by cartilage, right? So the cartilage of the ribs connecting to your vertebrae at the back, the cartilage of your ribs connecting to your sternum at the front. Okay, so the ribs, the xiphoid process is a fancy name for your solar plexus. You know that little bump at the bottom of your sternum there? That's called the xiphoid process. And then the pubic symphysis is right between your pubic bone. Okay, so we want that to be slightly movable, especially for women during pregnancy. So we need the pubic bone to open up for childbirth. Yeah, okay, so they are slightly movable. The first 2 joints we don't really care that much about as trainers because we don't train them, we don't move them. Yeah, the third joint is the most important joint for us as trainers. It's the synovial joint. These are the freely moving joints. And they are covered in a sac of tissue, and inside the tissue contains fluid. synovial fluid. And what the fluid does, it allows the bones to glide nice and smooth on each other. Okay? So your hip, your elbow, your ankle, your knee, they're what we call synovial joints. They're freely moving joints, and they contain that fluid, yeah, which allows the bones to sort of glide nice and easy on each other. Okay.